and just based on all the feedback that Kelsey, is just sharing, all the data that's out there, the two most important criteria, rather than 7 or 12 for us that we hold, are that someone is a performance match as much as they are a purpose and values match, or a culture match for us. So being a purpose and values based company, organization, we've got something defined that really helps us guide us towards hiring to each of those. So much of the performance match, and there are ways that to really value or investigate into each in interviews, and we're going to talk about those. Performance match can be such a miss because someone can have loads and loads of experience, and you look at an application and you see 7 years or 5 years, or however many different layers of management or experience they have, and they look like a performance match. And that's actually not always the case. Sometimes that, could be someone not letting go of someone that should have gone a long time ago. So, and then on the flip side of that, we can't just hire to culture, because then we have a lot of smiling, energetic, positive people that can't do the job that we need them to do and be a performance match. So really, really has to be both. And we're going to talk about how to hire to both. So. Is this me, Kels?
Yes.
Okay. So the first step that I think is so important for all companies is to have some type of a pre-screening process. First of all, it keeps all of us out of the place of hiring, going to a stack of applications when we have a position to fill. That's definitely not going to help anyone hire to both culture and performance. So having a screening process, even when someone turns in an application, is such a really, really important part of hiring. That does some narrowing down even before we've done an interview, and really, really keeps you from wasting your time. There's different levels of screening process depending on what each of your companies are looking for. In the hospitality industry, some of the really important elements are what we've listed here. So the smile, eye contact, attitude, and aptitude or ability. So for our industry, these are 4 things that we track to help us to screen an applicant and decide whether or not we want to sign them up for an interview. And that really helps us streamline and get closer to hiring to the 2 criteria that we need to hire to. So we call this a C-score. Anyone can have a screening process, whether it's, even if you're just primarily online hiring, there are questions, more effective questions that you can ask to determine whether someone's even worth an interview. And even if it's 2 questions, maybe one question is culture-based, maybe one is performance-based, to just ask questions that have some type of measurement for you and your company to say, okay, if they don't answer this way or perform this way, then we're not even going to consider them. And that in itself could just really minimize the poor hiring or the waste of time where you get 2 or 3 minutes into an interview and go, oh my gosh, how did I not see this when I signed this person up for an interview? So really having the screening process helps quite a bit. Our interaction, the one that we've listed here with the C-score, this is 2 minutes. We just take a couple minutes to actually talk to someone, and in those 2 minutes time, we decide whether these 4 things are at the level they need to be to consider them for an interview, and then we move forward. So whatever your process might be, having a screening process is a really important part of hiring the right person.
Yeah, and I would just add too that I know we do it in the restaurant. We have our applicants come in and apply, and that's how we can have this 2-minute conversation. But it's also, there's a way to do it through even a simple phone call, and asking them a couple questions and getting a gauge for their response. I mean, it doesn't just have to be in person. It may be hard to track some of these things over the phone, but it could be just a small interaction with that applicant to kind of get a feel of, where they're at and what they're putting on their application.
Mm-hmm. So our interview process, this is actually a picture of an interview, a real interview going on. So our format and the way that we set up our interviewing is pretty, I think, unconventional, at least compared to the interviews I've been part of previous to Nick's. There's three chairs, 2 chairs for the interviewers, 1 chair for the interviewee. So we've got 2 people interviewing in each of our 2 interviews, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is to have 2 different personalities within our company paying attention to the person that we're interviewing. If it were myself and, let's say, Brandon, who's another manager in our company, doing an interview, well, Brandon's, in his 20s, he's at the beginning of his career, he's full of energy, doesn't have any children yet, so he's really independent. He interviews as that person and all the hats he wears in his self. And me, as I interview someone, in addition to being an team member, I'm also a mom. I'm also, a wife. I've got different parts of me that play into how I perceive someone's interaction. So having 2 people really helps us balance out the perception and how we take in answers. So that's a really important part for us. And the second reason that we do the chairs and we don't have any tables in front of us per se is to really keep the format open. There's no tables to hide behind. There's no leaning that's almost invited. It really keeps the body language neutral and authentic. So we can see someone's hand placement when they're sitting in an interview and they don't have something to lean on. We can see if their body language is certainly when we ask them a question, or, if they're tapping their foot, to imply some sort of nervousness. So having the chairs, the nothing in front of us really serves us to get to the real person. Also keeps the format open. And you notice in the picture, the chairs are really equally spread apart. It's not 2 on one side and 1 on the other. They're each, it's really a circle of 3 in its true form. So, and then with having 2 interviews and 2 interviewers each time, on that second interview, we've got one of those 2 interviewers stays the same and 1 changes. So we make sure overall we've gotten 3 different perspectives, 2 from the same person and 1 from a different person, or 2 from a different person, sorry, confusing you, on the same person. Having someone come back for a second interview on a different day also gives us a fresh perspective on that person. People, I don't know about you, but I've experienced people really preparing for an interview. I've even prepared for an interview myself before, years ago. And preparing is really just practicing what you think is going to be said. And we want the most authentic answer. What's great about having 2 interviews is if someone's really prepared one day and a different day they show up completely differently, thank goodness we had 2. And we look at ourselves maybe in that second interview and go, how did we not see this? And we're grateful to have that second opportunity to see if someone's, playing us in any way. We can pay attention to that in the second interview and avoid a potential bad hire. So.
Would you say that we're also giving some comfort to the applicant too, and having that one person stay the same?
Maybe I guess I would have to ask the applicant. I don't, it's not necessarily the intention, and I bet it is the result. I bet they feel like they know someone a little bit, and that's not the reason for it. I'd say that's just a fortunate byproduct.
Okay. Great. Well, yeah, that's our format of how we interview. And so now we get to the questions, and these are some questions that I just researched and found that people ask of the applicants. And so what struck me as funny is, who would win a fight between Spider-Man and Batman? And then how honest are you? Of course, Spider-Man would win because he has the thread coming out of his hands. So of course he'd win. And then how honest are you? It just struck me as who would admit that they're not honest? So what kind of question really is that? So the point here is that while these questions, some people may think that they're tricking them or that they're going to find out an underlying meaning to them, what are they really doing? And what we found is that we want to go back to that criteria. What are we looking for? We want a culture match and we want a performance match. So what are the types of questions that are going to reveal to us whether or not this applicant is the one for our environment of culture match and performance match? So that really brings us to uncovering the personality of the applicant. And how they're going to show up in the interview versus on paper. Like Amy was talking about, a person can really prepare all they want for an interview and think that they're going to give all the right answers. And when we ask them questions about what they like to do for fun, or how they deal, or to give us a specific example of how they deal with stress, they might get stumped because they think that they were going to be asked questions about maybe what's on their resume or other things. So we really want to make sure that we're asking certain types of questions that is going to give us the answers to really decipher whether they're a culture match and that they're going to perform to the level that they say they can. And Amy, this brings us to, what types of questions are going to get us those responses that we're looking for. Well, not those responses, but the data that we need to make that decision.
Yeah. It's a great point. I still am chuckling at your previous slide, Kels, imagining those questions actually being real and out there somewhere. And I know you've done your research. It just, it makes me laugh. Talk about not asking the real question. I doubt these are questions that get us what we need, at least not nearly as quickly. They might get you what you need and not nearly as quickly as asking the real question. So, so when we talk about question style, there's a couple different specifics that we absolutely follow in order to get to the core of who someone is and as quickly as we can. So, being that we have two interviews, and we need to get to the root of someone as soon as we can and feel certain, absolutely certain after two that we've figured that out. So one of the elements that we follow are the open-ended questions. And what's great about the questioning style or these specifics to interviews is it's really also a kind of a lifestyle. If I've got a question that I need to be answered, what's the most direct way to ask my question? Open-ended questions will get us a real answer more quickly. If we ask, do you handle stress well? Or do you respond well to a stressful situation? And the answer is yes. There's going to be another follow-up question to really get me to what it is I want to know. So to go to that question in the first place is how we're going to get there faster. We really need to spend all of the interview asking our questions, and the end of the interview, the applicant gets their questions answered. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So with open-ended questions, they're going to start with how, or under what terms, or what types of, so we need questions that are going to get us specific answers. Also, we don't want to lead an applicant with part of an answer ourselves. So I think it comes from trying to make people feel comfortable in an interview, where we might say, how do you handle stress when you work? Do you take a deep breath? Do you, talk to yourself in your mind? And all of a sudden we're offering them answers that they could go, oh, I take a deep breath. And so that's one way that we might be leading someone into an answer versus just saying, how do you handle stressful situations? And letting it be. Just letting the question be the question. We don't want people to feel uncomfortable, and we do want them to feel themselves. And if I make someone feel too comfortable in an interview, they're going to be the most relaxed version of themselves, and that's not going to help me understand how they actually handle stress, how they handle when they're nervous. So we want real as real can be. And so the less engaged we are with each of their answers, the more authentic they will be. I'm pretty sure there's some professional interviewers out there. I've had a handful of people come through with applications in our restaurant repeated times, and they feed off of our response. If someone gives an answer to a question and us as interviewers, we smile, they're going to go, oh, they liked that. I'm going to say more of that because that was obviously the right answer. And all of a sudden, they're steering themselves into direction that's not necessarily authentic. It's just what someone wants to hear. That's not getting us to the center or the core of who somebody is. So asking an open-ended question, not offering any answers, not leading with body language, just really staying neutral. Not frowning, not furrowing, not having our arms folded, really just keeping our body language and our presence as neutral as possible. Another thing that we must demand as interviewers, all of us when we interview, is specific. So just last week, I was in several interviews, and I'll say to an interviewer, tell me a specific time that you had 3 tables sat at the same time and how you handled that stress. So I named a scenario and said, tell me a specific time. And the interviewee went, well, typically what I try to do when I get multiple tables that sat in there, and they're giving me some prepared answer. Any one of us can give a hypothetical answer. We need a real one. That's what, and at least that's what we're asking for. So in an interview, actually saying, tell us a specific time that this happened, and then let it go and get that specific. The hypotheticals are how we get lost in, oh, that's a great answer. Is it a real answer? What I would do under stress and what I actually do might be pretty different. I'd love to live in the hypothetical world and be perfect, but I'm not. And so how do we get that real answer? And that's really demanding the specifics in the answers. So paying attention to that, paying attention to when they're telling a story versus giving an answer. And that's what declining the hypotheticals is referring to. Also leading with body language is one way to lead. Leading with a question is another way to lead. If I ask a question like, do you feel it's important to be respectful at work? There's only one right answer to that question. That's a leading question, and it's a closed-ended question. So what is it that we really want to know? And that's how we train our interviewers. What is it that we really want to know? Think about that, and then come up with some knock it out of the park, open-ended question to get to the answer. And what's great is usually the answer then leads us to something like, tell me more about that. In an interview last week that I was in, I had, if you're not in the restaurant industry, this might sound like jargon to you. I had a server who used a term, in the weeds, repeatedly in our interview. And what in the weeds means is buried and so busy I can't breathe. And Kirsten, I see you smiling, so I know you know that term. Um, and it was interesting to me that she used that term so many times, and it was to describe a situation. So that caught my attention. I said, tell me more about being in the weeds. Say more about that. And so wherever we can find that little nugget that's going to get us to the stress that someone experiences, or the conflict, or the fear, that's how we keep peeling back the onion. So okay, so yeah, sorry. So here, so the two types of questions that we said we asked you in an interview, the two criteria are performance and culture. So performance, I think, is the one, especially Kelsey said that statistic. What was the percentage, Kelsey?
89.
89% of turnover. What was it?
89% of hiring failures are due to poor cultural fit.
Poor cultural fit. Okay. So that means that we're hiring to performance or what someone's experience looks like, and we're not necessarily to the culture match. So our interviews are balanced in that we make sure we interview to both. These are really great, simple ways to interview for performance, to come up with an activity. So each of you in your businesses, I'm sure, have different responsibilities that you could ask someone to just, take a lap, or walk through the room, or file these papers, or answer that phone. Whatever activity you can ask someone to do, and then while they're away doing that activity, rate it. And when they come back, ask them to rate it, and find out how aligned your ratings are. How well did they think they executed that activity? How well did you? You don't need to share what your rating was, but this is how you find out, okay, is their version of A+ or high performance the same as mine? And continue the interview. So that's one way you can get a performance-based question or some data out of an interview without having, if you're interviewing for someone to be an administrative assistant, you don't have to ask them to type a single thing or, open a single document. You can actually just ask them to do an activity. Another thing that we look for is we'll ask after they do some type of activity what they would do differently if they could to enhance their performance. What would they do differently? And if someone says nothing, I actually thought, I think I did a pretty good job, I wouldn't do anything differently. For us as a learning organization, we would see that as a red flag. I don't want to hire someone who thinks good enough is good enough, especially in the interview. We want to hire people who always can find something they can do to enhance their performance. So there's a couple different ways that we rate speed or performance or behavior, and all that lead us to the performance match of the two criteria. So Kelsey, what would you add to that? If anything.
Yeah, I loved I was taking notes because I loved your ad about the learning environment, and that's so crucial. I just had a couple interviews this morning, and when we asked them, I'm done with my questions now, what questions do you have? And they may not have any. That kind of rubs me the wrong way. If you're actively seeking this position, aren't there going to be questions that you have as well? So that might be another red flag for me, I think, in my pre-screen. They should come with questions. So that's
yeah. And you're talking about manager interviews, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I would agree for that level of performance that we're looking for. I would agree. And sometimes we do get 16-year-olds who don't have any questions because it's their first job and they don't know what to ask, and that's okay too. So it really is the context, and I totally agree with you, Kelsey. Okay, sorry. I was minimizing something on my screen. Okay, so then the other type of the other criteria that we're hiring to is culture. So some of the ways that we ask culture-based questions for us are referring back to our values. One of the things that we do as part of our pre-screen is to ask an applicant to read the cover page of the application, and our cover page is our values and our purpose. And we have them read through, and then when we do when we talk to them with their application, we might ask a question about that. Later on down the road here, when we're doing an interview, we know that this has happened once. We know that we asked them to read the values, so we'll ask them again, what's still standing out to you about the cover page? So that's one way that we start to determine whether the values really struck them. Some people will just rattle off, oh gosh, the fun at work, they'll rattle off a value here or there and say that one is still my favorite one. Some people will go, gosh, that was a whole week ago. I have no idea. And it doesn't mean they're an absolute no. It's just, okay, interesting that they couldn't remember any element of any of our values. We're not looking for people to recite them, just something that's standing out. So that's one way that we determine some level of culture match. We ask team-based questions to ask, we'll ask for an example of a time they've been on a team and ask questions about how they raised performance of the team. And those also help us connect their answer to our values. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have anything but a hypothetical. So handling conflict, part of our expectation as a next team member is to coach. We're a trust and track organization, so they're not going to get a whole lot of bossing around. And as a result, then we need people who can be coached by, we need a 40-year-old to be able to be coached by a 20-year-old and be okay with that. So we might look for opportunities, an example of a time that they've received feedback that they didn't agree with, or had to receive feedback from someone less tenured than them. So just getting answers to how people handle feedback or conflict really connects it back to our 12 values, our established core values, to decide whether they sound like they're a fit. We don't always find someone who's aggressively seeking conflict, especially in the younger age. And if they make some type of inference like, I did do this and it just didn't go that well, hey, someone who's willing to take the risk and step up, that to me is a culture fit. So I think that's it for that one, Kels.
So then to finish up explaining our process a little bit, after we finish the interview, we ask the applicant, like we talked about, if they have any questions for us. And then we tell them that we will be in contact, what is it, within the week?
Yeah, 24 hours. 24 hours if they're a yes, and by the end of the week if they're a no.
So then that gives us the opportunity to, let them go and have that time with the other interviewer to really decide, are they a yes or are they a no? And then from there, we really want these new team members to feel our purpose and get the next experience right from being hired. Mm-hmm. So, Amy, you could talk maybe a little bit about how we contact them and offer the job.
Definitely. So we would never want to hire someone and have them, first of all, not know right away whether someone's hired or not. If they're hired, then we call them to let them know they're hired. If they're not, we send them a coupon in the mail. So in the mail, they'll get a little notification that says, thanks for your time. We've decided to go a different route. Here's a coupon for an individual pizza. Please come back and see us another time. And so now it's a no for a hire, and here's a way to keep them as a guest. we want to make sure that we are treating our community, and the people that we're interviewing in our community with dignity and respect, and actually honoring their interests in our company. So what's so great about that is that, and Kelsey, you've seen this too, is we have people come proudly walking in the door with a decline coupon for a free pizza. They're here, and even though, yes, that means I didn't get the job, I'm here for my free pizza. And so it's a really nice way to reinforce our culture in some way, and honor someone's time and just say thanks in a really nice way. So that's one thing that we do right off the bat that reinforces our values, our purpose, and treating people with dignity and respect. So the work we go through to hire in the 2 interview process and the pre-screening process, quite a bit. So we do quite a bit to make sure we're choosing the right people and make sure that the right people are choosing us. And after someone's hired, the steps we take that follow can really make or break their choice to choose us. So if if a company doesn't set their new employees up for success, let's say they go, whatever length period of time without hearing from someone after they've been hired, that can really cause someone to start having some doubts about the company that they chose, or knowing what's next, knowing what's coming up. So, I think some people would call that the onboarding process. So when are the next steps? How are the next steps? And what do you take the time to do to really set someone up for success after we've done all the work of finding the right person? Orientations are a really important part of sending the strong messages about your company that you want to send. So if your company is a purpose and value-based company in any way, then make sure in your orientations you're spending time on culture, and possibly even more time on culture than you're spending on your policies and procedures. Those first couple days are going to send the messages to your employees about who you are and what kind of decision that they've made in choosing you, and vice versa. So we'll spend we have a 2-day orientation, most of our time spent covering culture and covering our expectations of our team and how they treat one another and how they treat our guests and how we expect the guests to treat them. And we go through our training process. So now there's no wondering or confusion about what might be next. They know what's next. They know they're going to be trained, and they can step into it. Sorry, the dog's going to bark. So the side-by-side training is how we make sure that people have the skills to do what they need to do, and that supports retention as well. I think, Kelsey, you could probably agree to this. I think that one of the key factors in the restaurant industry of why people don't stay is the very reason they also want the job. Some people love getting hired and getting thrown into the mix, just put right into the position, very little training. Oh, I learned so great that way. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 months later, they're like, this kind of stinks. I think I'm going to go try that restaurant down the way. I don't feel really supported here. So the lack of training is definitely leading to lack of retention. So, and Kelsey, you want me to go through all of this, or are you taking the other 2?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
So also in orientation, we teach, the background, why Nix is there, and our purpose speaks a lot to that, but also, how did it start? We share the story that, Nick found that there wasn't really a place to take his family where kids can be kids, and that's how it started. And we talk a little bit about the construction. So these team members that are coming on, they feel like they're part of the history. And that's really important to connect. You go into a new job sometimes and you're like, oh, I just started and this company's been around for 50 years and I don't really feel connected to what happened in the past. And this is kind of a way that we can connect them. We share the story about that the cobblestones are from downtown Chicago, and that, the wood beams in our restaurant are restored from old barns. so that these team members really feel like they're connected to the restaurant. And then it's also an opportunity for them to share with our guests. Those are cool tidbits of information that they can connect with our guests about and kind of share with them. Excuse me, sorry. And then lastly is our purpose. That's huge, and how each of them play a role in it. Our pizza makers, they might think, oh, I'm just here to make pizzas. I can't connect to that purpose. I can't create an experience for them. And we really talk about how each person, even from placing the sausage correctly on the pizza, can impact that guest and their experience. They always come and always get that sausage pizza, and it's always got 60 pieces of sausage that are evenly spaced. So that they're always expecting that from us. And that's one way that a pizza maker can, contribute to the next experience. So sharing that and spending a lot of time there in orientation is really important for us, and just keeps this process that we've set up of hiring going, that, we want to make an impact, and we want each of these new team members to feel important along the way, even from hiring all the way through training and for the rest of their career at Nick's. So we're really sending some strong messages.
I think all of the things listed here, and really what is so important to do with people, especially nowadays, is just really understanding the why of everything that you do. There's some businesses that just keep things such a secret, not even realizing that, to tell someone what to do is one thing. And if they decide not to do it that way because they disagree, then, you're not going to have consistency, and it's not a supportive culture. If we share the why behind everything that we do, then at least there's understanding of why something is the way it is. And now people don't necessarily have to agree with it, and they understand what the purpose is behind it. And we've talked about millennials and how that's such a critical part of hiring and training right now. And for me, as a non-millennial old lady, I like to know the why behind something, so I can get passionate about it and feel part of something bigger. So I think that goes really for anyone who wants something more than just a job.
Yeah, you read my mind with that. Millennials, they're not going to do something wholeheartedly unless they know the why. So
yeah,
that's great. So before we talk about our interview and hire class, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions that have come up for you. You can either put them in the chat or unmute yourself, either way. So some questions that have come up in the past are, who interviews in our restaurant. We have our trainers as well as our managers interview, and that really sheds some light on who they can bring on their team. And we have a question in the chat. When in the interview process do you give the applicant the values? So Amy, you want to talk about that? Well, actually, in the interview process, on our cover sheet, so when they fill out the application is when we share all of our values and our purpose. So I know Amy talked about bringing it up again in the interview, but they're actually given that when they fill out the application. So that's when they first see our values and our purpose.
Sorry, I had muted myself on accident, so I was answering, but then I realized you couldn't hear me. So sorry about that, Kelsey.
Oh, no, that's okay.
And that's the exact answer. So.
So Amy, have you ever had someone say, "Can I take this with me?" I guess that might be a good question too.
Yeah, they definitely have done that, and they're welcome to take it. Yeah, we do ask people, or we do have people who ask, thinking that that might be something that they're leading to. So, and it's not necessarily, but we have had people ask. So,
And Kirsten's asking, what 2 questions can they ask when accepting the application?
the they. I'm not following the question. Do you, Kels? Sorry, Kirsten.
I think she's asking what are 2 questions that we ask when accepting the application.
Oh, and we lost video. I don't see her anymore. So 2 questions that we ask when we accept the application. One that we absolutely ask. Is that what you were asking, Kirsten? The one that we absolutely ask is, what stands out to you from the cover page? And the reason we always ask that is because we know when we distributed the application 10 minutes ago, we told them to read it. Whoever it was, whether it's a host or a busser or anyone, we told them to read the cover page. So the first question we ask is, what's standing out to you? And then a second question that will come up next for sure would either be why Nix or why serving. If it's a server who's got 3 other places that they've served before, I'm going to ask why serving. So just to get me some opportunities to see them smile. So if we go back to the C-score, it'll give me some chances to track smile, track eye contact, track their attitude and their aptitude or ability. So.
And then Nicole is asking, sorry, go ahead.
That's right. And you have your hostesses ask those questions, or who do you have set up your interviews?
As far as talking to the applicant, all of our certified interviewers can do that. So that's managers, and several of our trainers have also become certified interviewers. So any of them would talk to an applicant simply because they do have the additional training around open-ended questions and what questions to ask. And all of our hosts are trained on how to distribute the application, what to say. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then Nicole is asking, do you only have paper applications or do you have an application online, and why?
That's a good question. I'll answer the first part. You answer the second part, Kels.
Okay.
We have both. So the paper applications, we really like people to come in because of our industry. We really like to see someone's body language and tone of voice and really track an authentic interaction. So we don't really run ads, and very rarely do we. So it's mostly walk-in applications for us at the hourly team level. And then Kelsey is rather involved with all of our manager and upper management interviewing. So Kelsey, you can speak to the online application.
Yeah, with the online application, we do, place ads on Monster and those sites for the manager positions. And we reviewed the resume, and it's a similar format. With what we found is that we want to keep the process similar for the restaurant. So we actually do video interviews for those first pre-screen. So we ask, common questions to track performance and culture-based for that level, such as, what do you like to do in your free time? Seeing that they're a culture match, and then just tracking the body language for a quick pre-screen. Those take about 15 minutes on video, but that's the great thing about technology is that we're able to do that now. So kind of the same process. And then do we take notes during the interview, or do you have a list of questions that you typically ask?
We do not take notes. Simply because of all of the all of the stories, I mean, I don't know about you, when I'm speaking and someone's writing, I can get pretty carried away in my head pretty fast about what they may or may not be writing. And therefore that would shift, if we go to an interview, that might sway them one way or another. So we don't do any notes during the interview. And we have a list of questions that we start with. So and by starting with, I mean when we start training, in order to really get the plane off the ground and just get started with asking some questions, we train, here's your go-to list of questions when you don't have any spontaneous questions that have come up. And then once people continue to interview and practice, we rarely refer to any of the probably 12 or 13 questions that are on there, and just have the series of questions that that we would ask. The question about the values. Our questions in an interview are more style based than they are what question do I want to get answered? Like we said earlier, we're trying to figure out who they are. So all we need to do is get them talking. And then, like I said, that one server who said I was in the weeds, and someone says something like conflict or drama or stress, we'll hone in on that and go, say more about that. And that's where our questions really derive from, is their answers. Based on what they say, we ask for more. So.
Great. Other questions? I think we can go into talking about our class that's coming up then. So like Amy was saying about those list of questions and really practicing these skills, not giving off body language when we ask questions is hard to do. So this class really supports honing in on those skills of being an interviewer. And on June 8th and 9th is when our next class is. And because you're a part of this webinar, we have a special offer of $50 off enrollment if you enroll today. So all of my contact info is in here if you would like to go ahead and do that. And we will send this out in an email to each of you so that you have this information that we talked about in case you want to review it at a later point. Amy, what else would you add about the class that makes it so unique?
Well, it's just a lot of practice. It's a lot of, we do a lot of practice. So it's not just teaching. We go right into practicums on the first day, and then spend most of the second day just doing and practicing and getting feedback. So I really would just say that's the benefit, is there's real-time work that we do and get feedback on and practice. It's not just lecture and taking notes and learning. There will be some real engaging work that's involved, and it's fun.
Great. Well, we hope to see each of you there, and feel free to contact that email if you have any further questions about any of the things we talked about today as well.
Yeah. Great. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.